In the bird's eye view curriculum video, I kind of gave you a general outline of curriculum. And remember that I explained to you that curriculum falls into two broad categories. One is whether it's Christian-based, secular, or faith-neutral, and the other is the type of approach. So what I'm going to do now is to break down each one of those approaches and give you a little bit more about it. And I want to give you some quick characteristics. And if you find one that interests you, then obviously you can do some more in-depth study and also look at the book list that I provided. Okay, so this first one that we're going to jump into is the traditional approach. Also, the traditional approach goes by many names in the homeschool world. Some people refer to it as an all-in-one. Some people call it a boxed curriculum. These terms are used interchangeably. Also, some new homeschoolers use the word workbook approach. Okay, so what is this approach? Well, it's the one that you and I probably are both very familiar with because it's probably the same one we used if you went to public school. It is. We used workbooks, we used work texts, we had quizzes, we had tests, there was a schedule, there was a check-off list of what to do. The teacher's manual even can become scripted. And so it has accountability. And even some of the schools are accredited. Now, curriculum's not accredited, just schools. Okay, and I'm explaining a little bit about that in just 1 minute. But I want to finish giving you some of these characteristics. So it has, like I said, it has accountability. They usually come about 170 or 180 lesson plans. And as new homeschoolers, we kind of like it. We think we do. And it's normally what most new homeschoolers purchase when they start without any research, because it's the only thing we knew. It's what I did too when I first started. That was part of my problem with burnout. I didn't think outside the box, so to speak. I only thought that was what curriculum was and that was going to do the trick. And magically, if we did every 170 or every 180 lessons, boy, my kids were caught up and they weren't going to be behind. Nope. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Okay, now let me tell you some of the reasons why you would use this curriculum, okay? Because I have used parts of all of the approaches through my many homeschool years. That's because homeschooling is a journey. It's a lifestyle. Some years you have more time to lesson plan and follow your much-loved homeschool approach, and other times life's just not like that, and we just have to get through life and do the best we can. So I got burned out because I was trying to create all my own lesson plan in the beginning. Okay, then I said, you know what? I need to take time for myself. I'm expecting my third child. I have a toddler. I have one I'm trying to teach to read. I better get some help. This may not be exactly what I had as my idea for homeschool, but the lesson plans are laid out. So what I learned was I could still use a boxed approach, but it needed to be tweaked to suit my kids, because a boxed approach or an all-in-one means that all subjects are across the same grade level. Most kids, if not all kids, are not on the same grade level in every subject. You can see the huge downside to that. And here's the other thing. If this wasn't working for your kid in public school, then just coming home and changing just where you're doing school and but getting the same thing public school uses, and then saying 3 or 4 months into the journey, this isn't working? Are you using the same thing? Are you switching and trying to find a good fit? It's a lot of work. It's not easy. The first year is hard. I'm just here to tell you, it can be flat out hard, but it doesn't have to be harder than it needs to be. But if you get a curriculum that your child is already struggling with in public school and doesn't fit their learning style because a public school says something's wrong with the kid instead of something being wrong with the approach, then you've set yourself up for failure. Don't do that. But I have used a all-in-one or a box curriculum when we moved. I didn't have time to lesson plan. I knew I could rip out 5 days of lessons and still be okay. I like, nope, we know this. Nope, we know this. Oh, I need this guidance here. That's how you use it. That's why sometimes you'll hear seasoned veterans say, oh, don't get a box. It's just a waste of money. I really don't view it a waste of money because my time's worth something. I will use it as a guide, but I will adjust it up or down to fit my kid. It's a lot better to have a plan than not have one. On the years that I said, you know what, I just can't lesson plan. I just don't have the time to pick and choose. Okay, so I just want to give you the balance of how of looking at a box curriculum and all-in-one. So the downside is, yes, it has one grade level across the board. Now, some box curriculum providers will allow you to pick and choose different modules within there where maybe you could go up a grade level, okay? But here's the problem with that. Now, remember too, let me explain the problem, and then I want you to remember one thing too, because I'm going to tie this together, and that is accredited. One point I wanted that I've been explaining all through this course, and I'll keep explaining, and that is you have to meet state laws. Okay, so if your state laws say you have to do reading and writing, but they don't set what you're supposed to use, then you have the choice to make those decisions. So don't make it harder by getting an accredited curriculum, or accredited homeschool program. Curriculum's not accredited, the school is, which means that they meet, it's a voluntary process where schools meet the standards set out by these accrediting agencies. And mostly what an accredited school is for, it becomes important mostly at high school when colleges want to be sure they're exchanging the correct amount of credits for certain courses. It's not so important in the younger years if you're not in a state that requires an accredited school. Now, some states are very strict. There's a handful of them that say you have to use an umbrella school or a cover school, and that usually is an accredited school. But even at that, even though I have used an accredited school before, what I figured out was that all we had to do was just do the assignments the school wanted. There was other things in there we didn't have to do that weren't going to be turned in. Do you see? That's how I survived when I needed it. I didn't do the assignments, the rest of them that didn't need to be turned in. I just did the ones that had to be turned in. Now, of course, at that time, I didn't need an accredited school, but I didn't know that. I set myself up for making my homeschool year harder than it had to be because I got an accredited curriculum, which means I had to meet with a teacher, teacher conference, through Skype or however method that they had. My kid had to be ready for testing. They had to be completed by this certain month. They had to start by this certain month. They had to have this length of hours of day, which is why they also say it's free. It's also called online public school. Of course it's free, just like public school curriculum is free, but is it really free? They own your time. They dictate the quizzes, the assessments, the teacher conference, and sometimes some of those online public school curriculum can take 4 to 6 hours, even for a young child to complete, which is unheard of. There's no way it takes that long to homeschool, 4 to 6 hours, just no way. A child cannot keep up that same type of pace year after year. Okay, now, you see the things to think about. I don't even like using the word pros and cons. I just like for you to think of the considerations. That's the word I like to, these are the considerations. This is what could be positive. It may not be a positive for you. It may be a negative. So I just like to say, these are the considerations. I'd like for you to pick it up and look at all facets of it because there's not any approach that's perfect. They all kind of have a weakness in them, but we can kind of change things to fit our kids. So who would use a box curriculum in the first year? Well, if you lived in a state, like I mentioned, that had accountability, it's easier to meet those standards this first year while you're learning if you had a curriculum that was laid out by an accredited school. Perhaps you have a teen. Teens, by the time they get to high school, are used to working in workbooks and work texts, and that's the thing they feel comfortable with. They've not had any other type of approach, so they're okay with it. Maybe you just need to change the geography. Maybe you just need to take them out of school because they were bullied or got into some trouble. A boxed approach is okay for that particular reason. Perhaps they're going to a college and it says they need a transcript from an accredited school, and that's even sometimes very rare because colleges really know homeschoolers in these days, and they accept mommy transcripts because they have teeth. Okay, Those are some reasons. Another reason would be a mom, perhaps, maybe she doesn't use an accredited, because a boxed curriculum can come both ways. It can just come boxed, or it can come accredited. Okay, now the accredited, they'll say is free, but where they don't own you, it will cost, but it's still laid out. Does that make sense? Okay, so perhaps a mom that has a full plate this year, maybe morning sickness, she has lots of children that are very young, or maybe she has time to lesson plan with them. She could use another approach. She doesn't want to use a box curriculum. Perhaps she just wants to get a teacher's manual. She doesn't have to get the whole box. Sometimes the companies will just sell a teacher's manual or a certain module. You can look, there's so many choices. Say you need a little bit of guidance, but not a lot, okay? Then look at something from box curriculum where the teacher's manual is a little bit more detailed and a little bit more scripted, okay? All right. Be sure and post any questions you have in the Facebook group. Let me know. But that is it about the workbook approach.